I don't know.
Howdy do, neighbor. It's Berean Spirits time once again. The boys have gathered around and they're ready for you. So join in, make comments, and study with the guys as they try to study as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. And now, here's the guys.
That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of Berean Spirits on a beautiful, beautiful Thursday morning here in the Ozarks of Springfield, Missouri. I'm sure it's just as beautiful, though, up there in Wichita, Kansas with Josh Thornhill with the Westside Church of Christ. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. And
Man.
it's warmed up a bit. Well, I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell right now. It's 39 degrees, so a little warmer.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of the snow is melted. I'm looking at the cameras here. We still got a big pile of snow in the parking lot, but otherwise, it's good.
Yeah. 39 was like our high yesterday, but we're supposed to get in the 50s today, so I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be a beautiful day for sure. Most of the snow is gone around here, though, so it's going to be nice. Yeah. Richard Dodson with the Kearney Church of Christ up in cold Kansas City area. How you doing there, Richard?
I was checking. We're going to get to 54, it looks like.
Yeah.
But it's 37 right now.
Yeah.
But, snow's quickly going away.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that. It can go bye-bye. I don't like it. Everything just needs to go to spring, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, well, we're going to get a taste of it over the next week, and then
anymore at night when I sit around with my wife, I gotta have a blanket.
Yeah,
I guess it's because I'm getting older, but I never used to have to do that, but boy, I sure do now.
She's giving you the cold shoulder. That's why.
Well, yeah.
Well, all those things you've been looking up, and thinking about. I don't blame her.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
Should I be worried here?
Oh man, no. Wait, Richard actually had
I'll explain it. I will explain it.
No, dude, don't do that. It's all good. Richard had a great thought though.
Yeah, you want me to lean on you, the guy who got me in trouble last night. Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it's just so easy.
Here's how things go down. We got Chris Kramer listening, so he I don't know how he does it, but sometimes, very rarely does anybody help me find a topic for the show, and so I'll get on social media and just see what's current. Maybe that's something that people would want to study, and so I found something that was current that bothered me.
Yeah.
And I brought it up to the guys, and that's what we're going to talk about today. There are some people who are advocating rules to relationship that have nothing to do with God.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it be cohabitation or even, we've seen it throughout history, just people trying to have relationships that, basically they're thumbing their noses at God's rules. And so I thought that would be probably a good show today, just to remind people that even in our relationships with each other, in the various forms that they take, God has rules that we have to abide by. And so that's kind of where I wanted the topic to go to.
Yeah. And it's a good one. I mean, that's, anymore today in our society, in our culture, and granted, I know it's been this way throughout history, but as we live through and we experience certain things ourselves, and we see the results of it firsthand, we recognize the detriment to society that takes place when God's law, God's rules, his his will is disregarded. He himself is disregarded. The idea of the family being under attack, and you look at the problems in whether it's inner cities, whether it's in rural areas, it doesn't really matter. If God's will is disregarded, then the family breaks down, the society breaks down, and it just creates a world of carnage, of havoc that is being wreaked upon us, and it's unfortunate. And so, going all the way back to the beginning, what we find is that God had certain standards that He expected us to live by, to adhere to respect, and anytime those standards are set aside or disregarded, then problems arise. And so, who is setting the standard for the regardless of your relationship, whether it's in marriage, whether it's a parent child, whether it is in a work situation, a neighbor situation, all of that is irrelevant as far as what relationship you want to talk about. But the point is, in all of that, there are guidelines that God has set forth of what He expects His creation, and particularly His children, to adhere to and be guided by. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, for sure.
Yeah, there are certain passages that appear to be like judgments or commands that are frameworks for how God wants us to do certain things. And I was involved in a Bible study where we were actually discussing that, and so that's kind of where I'm looking at with these relationships. There are scriptures that appear to be judgments, to where anything that we want to consider as far as a relationship in that realm has to meet that that judgment or that guideline, that or not guideline, but that rule that the Lord had set forth in order for us uh, to be able to meet. Otherwise, it'd be forbidden.
Absolutely. So what's the first one you got for us?
Well, I thought we just an easy one. We just talk about marriage, because marriage is such a, you have in today's world, you have people who are considering marriage again without considering what God says, and you know we can go back to like in Matthew 19, Jesus talked about from the beginning. How did God establish marriage? And in Matthew 19:4, he said he made them male and female. And he said that a man shall leave his father and mother in Matthew 19:5 and be joined to his wife. The two shall be one flesh. They are no longer two, but one flesh. What God has joined together, let not man separate. And what I'm really taking from this that I want to emphasize is that marriage is something that is between a male and a female.
Yeah, that absolutely. And Josh, when you look at these particular texts, a lot of people say, "Oh, well, God never said anything, or Jesus never spoke against." Jesus Himself never spoke against homosexuality. When in fact, that's exactly what He does when Jesus quotes from Genesis 2:24 and other passages about a man and woman. So He does make that very clear.
Yeah, and what Jesus does in Matthew 19 is goes back to the beginning. Of course, He's asked that question there. Is it lawful to divorce your wife for any reason? And of course, that's not the case, and God never wanted that to be the case. And so He says, have you not read that He who made them male and female in the beginning, back in Genesis chapter 1 and 2. And so he's pointing us back to the very beginning of creation and God's intent from the very start. And of course, it was male and female. But I think there's something deeper than the fact that God created them male and female. You consider how that came about. God had created Adam, And it says that Adam was naming every creature, and there was no mate that was suitable for him. He said that it's not good that man should be alone, but there's no created animal that is suitable as a companion for Adam. Something to be said about that. You know, these people calling their pets their children, and you know, all this kind of thing. There's something to be said for that. But I digress.
He's like a
Anyway,
cat person.
um, not that I'm saying it's wrong to have pets. I mean, they can be great, but we need to remember their place, you know, among other things. But anyway, I digress, as I said before. But God creates a woman, a help meet. And I think we just kind of throw that term around there today, like, oh, a help meet. Well, it's a helper meet for him, or a helper suitable for him. That's what that word means. The woman is the companion that is suitable for the man. The only suitable companion for a man. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have friends. Guys can't have guy friends. But the only truest companion, the suitable companion in the way that God created us to need, is the woman. And so they go together. And, you know, there was an airline. I don't remember even what it was, but it was trying to show Pride Month. It was trying to celebrate Pride Month, and so they had seat belts, and they were rainbow. The belt itself was rainbow, and then they had the clasps that you use in the airplane, and they had the normal bit, you know, that actually fits together. And then they had the two female ends side by side and the two male ends side by side. And then somebody said, you know, you really played yourself because only one of those combinations work. You know, we talk about male and female ends of electrical components and things like that. We use those terms for a reason, because the male and the female fit together. Male and male doesn't fit together. Woman and woman don't fit together. And so God created them in that way for that reason. And so they are complementary to one another. And so what Jesus does is points us back to God's design from the very outset.
Sometimes things are just so simple to grasp, and yet people are so determined to try and make it, to do it another way. And again, it just creates or wreaks havoc on a society and creates problems. There's no good that comes from it. Absolutely no good that comes from it. And you know, so many people, oh, well, that's not loving. You know, Josh, you're not being very loving, you know, in pointing that out. When in fact, that's exactly why you're pointing it out, is because you love the souls of people and they need to hear this. And we've talked about love and what truly, you know, love does and how it responds to error. But certainly that's one of the reasons why we do these types of programs and to point this out. But it's not just a male and female thing here, right? I mean, we're talking about a covenant relationship that God expects man and woman to engage in, to be a part of, and to respect the role that each one has been given. Richard,
I
Yeah.
want to interject something to what Josh said, because I didn't think about this, which is why I like doing this show. Is we get three minds working on something. But you know, I didn't even think there are so many people today that do look at their pets and they are expecting things from their pets that God intended their mate to provide. And I'm talking basically, you know, emotional support. I mean, there's more emotional support pets than I ever remember seeing anything like that when I was growing up. I've never seen so many emotional support pets as we see today. But yet I'm also seeing, and I may be wrong about the statistics, but I've talked to a lot of young people who are not looking for a companion, a female or a male companion. They're not looking for marriage. And, I think what Josh said was bringing that up was a good point, is the fact that, we're looking for the things that maybe marriage can provide. And we're trying to, find those things answered in different things. And I'm not saying having a pet's wrong. I am saying, though, that God has provided, certain things to be able to assist us in this life, such as a mate. And, we should be looking toward God's way of being able to have that type of support and like emotional support. And again, I think that's why young people should be looking for a mate instead of thinking to themselves, well, I don't need to get married. It's too expensive. I got a pet, no, that's not the answer to what God has provided you. I mean, God, you need to, number one, serve God, give yourself to him. And then, let God know that you would like to, and you need a mate. And if it's his will, then I'm sure the Lord will help you with that. But needless to say, we're not seeing that in the world today. And I dare say, and I'm probably stepping out here, I don't think we're seeing it a lot of times in the church where young people are actually looking for a mate. And I think that's most unfortunate.
Hold on now, real quick. You talk about emotional support animals. Like, don't be knocking my emotional support animal. Mine's a chicken, 3-piece with a side of fries.
Oh, amen. And that does it, folks. Like the Lord said, don't condemn those who eat meat.
Can I just add real quick? I had a pet when I lived on my own for about 10 years. I guess it was roughly 10 years that I was on my own there.
And
had
there's
a pet
a reason.
with me. What's that?
Never. It was a cat. That's why you were by yourself for 10 years. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, that pet does not provide the same companionship as my wife does. I mean, it just doesn't compare. There is no comparison.
It's not close.
It's not even close. No. And so, yeah, I mean, you enjoy having pets around, and that's good, but it's not meant to be a substitute. And I think we've mixed the value of life there. Human life is valuable. And I'm not saying just to be flippant with the life of animals. I think we should respect them because life is life. But those animals are not made in the image of God like men are. And so we need to honor human life above that of animals.
And take it one step further. There are even couples, instead of having children, have made children of their pets.
Yeah.
And, that's something that I don't think God ever intended. But that's the way they treat and love their pets. And again, I'm not against loving your pet, but the Lord wanted man to procreate.
So I just want to make a qualification here for a couple of things. All right. It's not a sin for someone to remain single all of their life.
No.
All right. So there are certain things that are talked about in the scriptures, even in Matthew chapter 19, when the disciples were like, oh man, maybe it's better not to marry at all. And Jesus talks about that. Paul, for various certain situations in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, encourage people not to marry if they could to because of the circumstances that were happening. All of that is understood, right? I mean, so we're just talking about a general kind of a rule where there are exceptions that are we acknowledge and recognize, but we're not getting into the exceptions right now. We're just talking about from the beginning what these passages really convey to us. And so don't think, oh, well, they think you have be in a relationship, you have to marry. That's not what we're saying.
No, what we're
but
saying
it
is
is
that
what God intended.
yes, there are people today who are looking for answers, and they're looking for it outside of what God has provided in the Bible.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Such
they
as
do that in everything, right? I mean, they even in religion, they go to man-made churches to look for salvation when it's not there. They sometimes look for the right thing, but they look in the wrong places. And so when you look to the scriptures to find out, right, the right place to look, then God is going to direct you in that because God's will is true. And I think it's interesting, and even in the pet conversation, God intends us to be good stewards of his creation. And I don't remember the exact text, but even in the Old Testament, somewhere, I think it's in the book of Leviticus, he talks about, not just being mean towards God's creation, destroying eggs from a bird's nest, or, just doing it to be mean, just to be destructive. I mean, God condemns a lot of those things, even how we treat animals, right? I mean, so there's, even in that relationship, there are rules and guidelines about feeding, right? While there are more in-depth points to be made from not muzzling the ox, right? The point is, look at the relationship you have with that animal that's working with you in the field. There are guidelines. So regardless of what relationship, I said earlier, and why we mentioned, people to people, even in relationships with animals, if somebody was to kill an animal of you, there were certain laws, rules that God intended to be followed, and for reconciliation, or compensation, I guess, to be made, for even pets or animals that were working for you. So um yeah, even in that, there were things that needed to be recognized and noticed by God's word.
my point is substituting,
Yeah, I
substituting
know it.
what substituting, like in marriage. Instead of it being male and female, there are those who search for male and male, or female and female. And again, that's not going to provide what somebody may think it provides, what God intended, but it doesn't. And it's violating a rule of God. And again, if God is not first and foremost in any of the relationships, if you don't include God, then you really don't have a relationship. God has to be included in everything in order for it to be as God, our Creator, intended.
And real quick, Richard, I want you to, if you don't mind, convey this little event that took place, because some people want to include God or Christ in the wedding, but not in the marriage. But you had a situation, and it cracks me up every time, where you were asked to perform a wedding, and it left a sour taste in your mouth, and partly because of how the woman originally wanted to be identified as you were performing the wedding.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's all I need you around here for, is to bring things up that, yeah. No, this
What's
woman,
relevant to our conversation, I think.
yeah, the woman, I was doing the wedding as a favor to a friend of mine, which they're not Christians. And, I thought maybe he'd give me a chance to talk about Christianity and all that. It was just a mistake. If they're not Christians, I don't even think about marrying anybody anymore. But needless to say, we went to
I'm
the
sure
rehearsal.
Catherine appreciates that.
Yeah. When they when we did the rehearsal, she did not want to be referred to as a wife. She wanted to be referred to as a woman, and but not as a wife. And I was completely befuddled. I mean, I was like, I don't even know how to do this wedding. If that's the case, you're becoming a wife. I mean, like, I don't know what you're expecting here. That's why people get married, a husband and a wife. I mean, I don't know what you're asking of me. And so, I, to make a mockery of it, I went through the wedding
Vows.
process. Yeah, the vows. And I just exchanged a woman for wife, and we get to the part where I said, "Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" And instead of saying lawfully wedded wife, I said, "Your lawfully wedded woman." And everybody started laughing, and she stopped me and she's like, "You're right. Make it wife." And I was like, "Nah, I got to get out of here. Oh, this was a mistake."
But it goes to show you the mindset of people, right? Not wanting to follow the rules of and acknowledge and respect God's rules and God's will concerning marriage and the responsibility and role of each person in marriage, for example, right? And so not only husbands and wives, of course, we can again talk about any relationship, but I think it's interesting, how people want to go about changing things. And it sounds good in their own mind, but again, it just, when you hear it out loud, sometimes it's like, okay, yeah, maybe not. Go ahead, Josh.
Well, and what we've kind of addressed though is that so many people want to have their relationships absent from God, but just look at society. I mean, they've just done such a fine job of having relationships without God in them, right? Like you just look at our culture right now, and the relationships that are absent of God are just thriving, right? No, they're not. I mean, and we wonder why there's so much brokenness in our culture. I was having this conversation. There's a text there in John chapter 5, where this man is sick. And it doesn't tell us what kind of illness he had. He had some kind of infirmity. And I think it's something that affects his ability to walk based upon the context of the conversation. But he'd been sick for 38 years. 38 years. I'm not even that old. Longer than I've been alive, this man has been sick. And Jesus goes to him at this pool where he's laying down, and he asks him, "Do you want to get well?" And it's like that's a weird question. I mean, you go to the hospitals and go room to room and you ask people, "Do you want to get better?" I'm sure most of them would probably say, "Yeah, absolutely. I would love to get better." I was having a conversation with somebody a week or so ago, and his wife works in a hospital, and he was saying that there was a woman who was in there, and her health was poor, and she walks into the woman's room, and there's like 30 soda cans that are sitting in there. And the reality is, a lot of people, they want the result. They want to go to the doctor and they want to have whatever's ailing them better, but they don't want to make any changes in their own life in order to get themselves there. And so, do you want to get well? Well, a lot of people don't. They want the easy fix that kind of masks the symptoms, but they don't want to truly be made well. And that's what we're seeing in our culture today. God says, if you want to have a wonderful marriage, if you want to have wonderful relationships with people, this is how you do it. And people just don't want to listen to it. And so they wallow in their mediocrity. They wallow in their broken relationships, and they wonder why it's so
It's
bad.
failure. It's not mediocrity. It's
failure. Yeah.
Uh,
And they wonder why.
Well, that's what mediocrity is failure as a whole.
I was talking to one man. He's divorced, married again. I asked him what happened to the first wife. He said, "I just fell out of love." I'm like, "Oh, well, you're in love with this wife." And he's like, "Well, yeah, for now."
For now.
And I'm like, this is what the world, there's no commitment for some people. And that's exactly not what the Lord, that's not a rule of God's when it comes to marriage. there's just no commitment to understand that, those weird feelings that one may get, that we mistake for love when we first meet somebody, you know, and then that's not love. The love is the fulfilling your commitment to them, and that's not always easy. Sometimes that's really, really difficult. That's why, on most marriage vows, it makes reference to sickness and in health. And, that means good times and bad times. And sometimes there's not a lot of good times, but you made a commitment and you're going to stick with that commitment. And that's one of God's rules for this. And so, these people who just go from one mate to another mate just because they're looking for that love they call love feeling, that's number one, that's not how God defined love. But number two, that's not fulfilling. That's just temporary.
Well, and
And
there are three words used in the scriptures for love, at least three: phileo, agape, and another one was you remember
Eros.
Eros, right? And so a lot of people have that eros, right? That's what they want. That's how it starts. That's where they're like, oh, let's get married, and then they never move to the agape. They never develop. They never choose, what God desires in the agape love, because that love is a choice. It is a choice in decision making. It is a choice to do and think certain ways and certain things in a relationship. But as soon as that eros, you just kind of, like you said, fleeting, fades away, they look somewhere else for that eros again, and they never move to that agape. And that's why these, in part, marriages are failing, and the idea of, well, I'm falling in and out of love. They're not choosing, right, the agape love that God demands and is the true guideline for, a long relationship with someone. And that's, and not just in marriage, right? Agape love is, something that we're to have for one another, for brothers and sisters, for our children, for our parents, for our coworkers, for our bosses. And the problem is they're like, well, wait a minute, I don't love my boss, I don't love my job, I don't love my neighbors. Like, well, you don't understand, and to your point a while ago, the way God defines agape love, it's not some fuzzy, tingly feeling or something, emotion. It is a choice and deciding to do certain things, the right things in their best interest. That's what we need to move towards and develop and grow in any and all relationships.
And I think, there's that eros love. That's kind of where we get the word erotic, or where that idea can come from. Marriage can last a little while with that, but it will fail if it doesn't have agape.
Yeah.
And you think about, I saw this, I guess, comic or whatever, this illustration where there's this old couple, and they're sitting on a bench, and it's raining, and he's angry. I got a scowl on his face, but he's holding out an umbrella to cover his wife from the rain. And the idea of that is, just because I'm mad doesn't mean I don't care. And that right there is an illustration of agape love. It's not, like you said, it's not that ushy gushy feeling. You need that, but that's not what that is. It's more a sense of duty, an obligating, or a sense of duty that you have for one another. That I'm going to seek your best interest. I'm going to do what's in your best interest. I'm going to, even if it means sacrificing, I'm going to look out for what's best for you. And there was a show back in the 90s, And there was this kid, he's in high school, and he's dating somebody, and he's having a relationship problem, and he goes to the main character's mother, and is getting some advice, and he says, or she says, well, what does she want? And he's like, well, how am I supposed to know? And she says, you're her boyfriend, you should know. And he says, well, if I was spending my time worried about her, who would worry about me? And that's very selfish mindset. I think we can see that. But um, what Jesus calls us for, what calls us to, what Paul calls us to in Philippians 2 is, I think, perfectly illustrated in that situation when it's lacking. He says in verse 3 of Philippians 2, doing nothing from selfish ambition or vainglory, but with humility of mind, regarding one another as more important than yourself, not merely looking out for your own personal interest, but also for the interest of others. And so we can think about that in principle and think, well, if I'm so worried about doing that, who's going to worry about me? Well, that's the beauty of this kind of love when it's done well, and particularly in a marriage relationship. You're looking out for her interest and she's looking out for your interest. And so you both have your needs met. Wow.
And even if she doesn't or he doesn't, God, right, is always, right? God always is looking out for our best interest. So that there is somebody who's doing it.
Absolutely. But it works.
Yes, it does.
I mean, it just works. And so many people are far too selfish to make it work in that way. And so God gives us the answer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just willing to love them before ourselves.
And the funny thing is, you'll see people, I'm going to bring up the pets again, but you'll see people display that type of love with their pets, but not with their family.
Yes.
So I've had guide dogs, right? I've had actual service dogs, not these, frou-frou little, I'm anxious, I need to, pet a rat in my purse kind of animal. But I mean, I've had dogs that have saved my life, literally, right? Pulled me out of danger, gotten me out of situations where, I could very easily have been killed by cars, by, in various situations, or, sides of cliffs and different things. So I've experienced what a true service dog can do for someone. And even when I was going through training with the service dog, they would tell us, if you're at home and your house is on fire, get out, right? Don't go back in for the dog. And listen, at the time, even back in the 90s and early 2000s, they had $60,000 to $100,000 invested in each service dog when they retired and were sent home with their guide or who they were guiding. And I mean, all this money was invested, and they were telling you, listen, this is a dog, right? Get your family to safety, right? And if it's safe, okay, but don't risk your life for the dog. And you think about the relationship and the trust that I built up with that animal, with Navarone, the last guide dog that I had, and I'm going to tell you that there was an emotional attachment. There's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, right? He's a dog. He was not a child. He was not my wife. And if the house was on fire and my safety was to get out, I wasn't to go back. And some people would think, that's terrible, that's horrible. But, to the point I think that we've been seeing and making, there is a difference between the life of an animal and the life of a person, the soul that has been breathed into us life, right, is what God has done. And that's what separates us from animals. And that's something to take note of, not to be flippant about it, but at the same time, recognize the difference.
I heard of a people in Florida when a hurricane came through who refused the evacuation orders and died because they didn't want to leave their pets. You know, they're valuing their pet's life over their own, and I mean, just the opposite of what you just described there. Um, so anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
We
it
got,
happens.
we have, now that's another relationship, but our children,
Yeah.
um, we got this in my neighborhood Facebook page. People are always they're always so concerned. They're posting pictures of dogs every time they see a dog out running around without a leash on. It's like, oh my, it's almost like an Amber Alert. And of course, some of these dogs I see in here, they're fully clothed every day. I mean, they're treated like children. They do. They clothe them and then they take them for a walk. And when the dogs get tired, they pick them up and carry them. And but yet then I see their children running around, with no oversight whatsoever. And it's, I brought this up to my wife many times. I'm like, they're really they're really good at being a parent to their dogs, but they're really horrible at being a parent to their pet or their children. And again, I think we're ignoring the rules God has set forth, where the emphasis should be on our children. We're just we're valuing one thing over another for whatever reason, and that's most unfortunate. We
Yeah.
need to we need to go back to God's word and consider what He says about those relationships. And this is not new. Uh, when it talks about children in Ephesians 6, it says honor your father and mother. Uh, and then of course, Jesus dealt with that because they were trying to change it. When he was making reference to the Corbin, instead of taking care of your parents when it got old, you could actually buy your way out of that responsibility. And when we're supposed to be honoring our parents, and there's just things that man is doing in their relationships without considering what God says about it. And we would be way farther ahead, even in the church, if we would consider what God says about how we are to treat each other and look to each other.
So with that, very quickly, I want to say this because ultimately, how we treat and go about in our relationships with people, it's conveyed over into our relationship for Christians in the church, right? Husbands and wives, right? It is a direct comparison to Christ in the church, according to Ephesians chapter 5. And so, however you think that relationship works, right, that's going to be conveyed over into your relationship in the church and vice versa, right? If you recognize that you are a part of the bride of Christ and you conduct yourself accordingly, then that is going to translate over into your relationship with your spouse. And don't think it doesn't, because it absolutely does. If you have no respect for God and his pattern and his word in one relationship, you ultimately will not have it in any relationship, even in the church or your direct relationship with God himself. So I think that's important. I know we only really talked about, in essence, the husband wife relationship. You touched on the children, Richard, but we are running out of time. So let's go through some last thoughts. Josh, do you have any?
I mean, we hear that idea as far as marriage, that it's a triangle, and that will be the most important relationship that we have outside of God. But really, all relationships work better when God is at the center of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Richard, last thought?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. David Sambersky said this. There's an old song back in the 60s that had a stanza that said, if you want to be happy the rest of your life, never make a pretty woman your wife. David, I'm going to give you some advice. And because I don't agree with that song. Here's the advice. You find a virtuous woman. If the Lord grants you a virtuous woman and you treasure her and love her as God said, and she does the same, and God is the center of your life, I promise you, I guarantee you, she will be the most beautiful woman you've ever seen in your life. I guarantee it. It works that way. They become the standard.
Absolutely. Yeah, God needs to be the standard of everything that we do in every relationship. It won't work without him. It just won't work without him. And Romans chapter 12 points out that as much as depends on us, live peaceably with all men. And to do that, we've got to follow, God's will, His word. Folks, we appreciate everybody tuning in, listening to Berean Spirits on this beautiful Thursday morning. You can also check us out through the podcast, Berean Spirits, on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember to search the scriptures with Berean Spirits.
Well, folks, that's all for today. Don't worry. Lord willing, the guys will be back next week for another Bible study on Berean Spirits. Until then, let the guys hear from you. Drop them some email at bereanspirits@gmail.com. They'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep studying that Bible.